In the beginning, Genesis. There will undoubtedly be those who will take issue with what might be considered my stupid, irrelevant, or unnecessary thoughts concerning the beginning. I feel, though, that I have made it abundantly clear that the ideas I lay upon these pages are nothing more than my own personal discussions with myself. I also will ask readers to forgive my occasional lack of proper citations. It is not meant to be a sign of disrespect or an attempt to circumvent credit where credit is due. I really just don't see the point in citing every small passage when I am obviously discussing a topic from a specified section of the Bible. So let me say in earnest that I consider the Bible to be one of the greatest books ever written or compiled, probably the greatest. Whether I consider it a valid source for the understanding of God and the salvation of my soul is another matter which I will save for later when I have actually read it. So with that, let me begin. Though I don't mean to give the impression that I will pick apart the entire Bible word by word, I do have a bit of a problem with the very first 3 words. I fully realize that the Old Testament, at least, was purportedly the inspired Word of God, as I understand it, and I might very well be wrong. The story of creation was sort of put into the heads of Moses and others in order that they might write it all down for posterity. Whether or not any of it is fair game for interpretation is a matter that others can determine. As I see it, if God meant for us mere humans to know something, he would undoubtedly let us know in no uncertain terms, would he not? After all, why inspire a handbook for living that is ambiguous when it will be required that we completely and promptly obey or die? I have a strong feeling, from what little I already know about the Bible, that this issue will be a recurring concern of mine throughout my humble quest for understanding. So in the beginning there was, etc. In the interests of clarity, I think we can interpret, the beginning refers to the beginning of the earth and heavens. I'll call it the universe. Setting aside the work of quantum physicists who are beginning to see evidence that there may actually be an infinite number of universes, supposedly God created our little corner of the universe at the very least in the beginning. So if there wasn't a universe before the beginning, where exactly was God? Heaven, you say? Where's that? If heaven was somewhere or everywhere or whatever, was the beginning really the beginning? It seems to me that in the real beginning, God must have rode into town and set up shop in some as yet undetermined way. I have heard people say that God is eternal. He was always there, or here, or somewhere. Well then, I have to wonder who or what created God. If he was already and always out there, then what might he have been doing with himself for the eternity or so that he must have existed before the beginning? And how can there have been a beginning if there was an eternity before it? Okay, I'm being a little facetious, but if we assume that God created our universe in the beginning, then don't we also have to ask ourselves what right we have to make that assumption? There is that interpretation question again. I realize that some of my ignorant understandings will seem tedious and even offensive to some people. I must admit that I have already caused a small amount of animosity in my own familiar circles because my agnostic probings make certain true believers uncomfortable. It is only after I fully explain that I am not looking for absolute answers or proofs so much as a measure of spiritual validity that others see that I am earnest in my quest for spiritual understanding. I try to make it clear that I respect the views and beliefs of others as much as my own, especially in light of the fact that I cannot validate or discredit the belief of others any more than I can my own. On the first day, God said, "Let there be light." He then divided the light into day and night. On the 4th day, God put lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide it again. into day and night. There was a greater light to rule over the day, the sun, and a lesser one, the moon, to rule over the night. He also made the stars. My experience as an amateur astronomer tells me that our sun is a star. It just happens to be a really close one. So if our star provided the light of day, beginning on the fourth day of creation, what exactly was the light created on the first day? According to the inspired word, the stars and the sun, same thing, were made on the fourth day. There may be an inspired answer that I have as yet to encounter, but at the moment I find I have to interpret, that there was simply light of some sort that apparently wasn't radiating from anything. It was simply there. Well, all right then. If God is able to create with the figurative snap of his fingers the universe, then it shouldn't be difficult to accept that his light doesn't have to radiate from a light source. Let's call it a work in progress. I find there are many, many passages in Genesis that I find disconcerting, to say the least. I will not attempt a fruitless discussion of them all, though I will think about a few. In Genesis 3:22 there is a direct quote from God, "Behold, the man has become as one of us." Who is us? Throughout my pitiful life I have been led to believe that there is only one God, and now God himself, in a direct quote, and in his infinite and omniscient wisdom, says us. This is the inspired word of God. Who is us? There is also the matter of the serpent, the tree of life, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It has been suggested to me that the two forbidden trees were placed in the Garden of Eden as a test for Adam and Eve, though this is not stated in Genesis that I have seen. And although it seems a likely enough explanation, it also raises a couple questions that I now wrestle with. If God strictly forbade Adam and Eve from eating the fruit of the tree upon pain of death, why did he feel the need to test them, knowing, as he surely must have, being God, that they would do it? If his ultimate plan was to send them out of the garden to become farmers, why did he create the garden in the first place? I should think him perfectly capable of just creating Adam and Eve down on the farm. The tree of life, strangely, appears to have gotten ignored after the tree of knowledge fiasco. God himself declares that the fruit of the tree of life would endow the eater with everlasting life. No one, however, seems interested in that. Had I been Adam, having been threatened with certain death by God himself, which didn't happen, and after being caught and condemned with nothing more to lose, would have certainly made a proverbial beeline to the tree of life and partaken of its fruit in fairly short order. That everlasting life would have come in very handy around that time, I should think. But since none of that happened, and to my knowledge nothing regarding the tree of life happened subsequently, why was it there? Did God not know which tree Adam and Eve might eat from? Might it have been an easier test if there was only one tree? The apparent reason for the story in the first place is of some curiosity. If God made Adam in his image, why didn't he know Adam would do what he himself likely would have done? Who exactly is supposed to benefit from the telling of the story? Farmers? Why didn't God simply make Adam right? If God was so adamant about obedience in the Old Testament, why did he create people who would disobey, and then get mad at them when they did? This too will come up again, I fear. With respect, hardly, to the serpent, I really do not know where to start. Why? Part of the test, you say? Well, all right, let's go with that. In the interest of understanding, I will review. God, knowing exactly what he was doing, created a talking serpent to tempt Eve into eating the forbidden fruit so that she, in turn, could tempt Adam into eating it, knowing by the promise of God that they would die, but also know of good and evil, apparently, as they were dying. What good is the knowledge of good and evil if you shall surely die? Quote, unquote. The talking serpent also proclaimed that if they ate the forbidden fruit, they would become like gods. Gods? Plural? Didn't he mean like God? Now it appears the serpent had some confusion as to the actual number of gods as well. This quest for spiritual enlightenment and validity is perhaps starting off on a strange and perplexing path, despite the supposition that these stories are the inspired word of God. After Cain slew Abel, he told the Lord that he didn't know where Abel was. He, Cain, also told God that with his banishment from the Garden of Eden, anyone he might meet would kill him. He then fled to the land of Nod, where he found a wife. Although I have issues with many more things than what I have just mentioned, I will address these few. Cain killed his own brother, so he was a murderer. Then blatantly and directly lied to God's face, so he bore false witness. And after virtually one line of worry, God told Cain that he would mark him, that anyone who killed him would face the wrath of God. These days, it might be construed as harboring a criminal. And just who were these other people that would kill Cain if he might encounter them? Assuming Adam and Eve were the first people on the earth, and Cain and Abel were the next humans, who were the others, and where did they come from? Where did Cain's wife come from? Where, in fact, did the land of Nod come from? Let me guess. Interpretation will answer all.